Hi, and welcome to the Red Tunic Podcast, a podcast where I look to rediscover what makes gaming fun and enjoyable by having positive conversations with those related to the industry. My name is Link, and today I'm joined by Pedro Guerra, creative director at Night Shift Games, currently working on Elsie. Hi, Pedro. How are you doing today?
Hey, Link. I'm good. Thank you for having me.
I'm glad to hear you're good, and no, really, thank you so much. I'm happy that you made the time for me. I'm grateful that you're here talking with me tonight.
Yeah, no, it's great. I always I'm always down for a good chat about games.
Awesome, awesome. So, Pedro, before we get started, if you don't mind, could you maybe tell, me and whoever's listening a little bit about yourself for what you feel they should know about, who you are, what you do, what have you, what have you?
Yeah, sure. I mean, so like Link said, my name is Pedro Guerra. I am a Cuban-born immigrant here in the U.S. and grew up here. I came over at a young age. Grew up in Miami, Florida, which it's relevant because I feel like it shapes a lot of who I am, right? I went to college for electrical engineering, and then right after I finished college, I was like, oh, I don't like engineering, but I want to try to make games, right? And that's what I've been trying to do ever since.
Well, thank you for that. And it's it's kind of interesting to hear electrical engineering to video games. Um, so like this is going to be I don't know how this one's going to go then. And I bet you say that in the sense of like I don't know where we're going to, how this is going to start. But how is it you got into developing and making games then?
Yeah. So, like I just said, right after graduating from college, I decided that I didn't want to do anything in engineering. So I wanted to go and make video games. Right. At the time, I didn't know anything about making video games. Video games have been a big part of my life. They've shaped a lot of who I am. Probably one of the reasons why I learned English so well and so quickly. It was probably through playing a lot of games and reading, through a lot of games. So right. So after graduation, I called up a couple buddies of mine, and I told them, "Hey, I wanna, I have an idea for this game." I had no idea what I was doing, right? But I felt like I had enough good ideas for making games. But like on the technical side or production side, zero understanding, zero clue. But my friends are like, "Cool, yeah, let's hear it." We met up, gave them the pitch, and they're like, "Okay, we know a couple people that might be interested in joining us too." All right, cool. So then got together with those guys, kind of sold them this awesome sounding game, which one day I'll make. That's my dream game. Uh, but yeah, it was from there. It was just a lot of learning, right? Like I didn't know anything, right? My confidence was at an all-time high, but the more I learned, the less confidence there is. There's just a lot of self-studying, self-research, working with that team. Kind of started like my own game company called Good War Games. I've released one official product, a bunch of game jams, just one little mobile game with some of those guys. And it was only after a few years of doing my own thing that I met the creator of Elsie, and he was already making the game. But then one year he's like, "Hey, I need some help." And at the time, I was only going to do to kind of work on the company and the game's like social media presence at the time. But then once I joined the team itself, I got really involved with the art, and I brought on what was our art director, a new art director at the time, because also was already a 2-year-old project by the time that I joined. And I brought one of the guys with me, which became the art director, which was one of the guys I was working on with my team, right? Like one of the original guys from my team. Uh, and then from there, we revamped all that was Elsie. I took over the Twitter, but then I started taking over, I started helping Alex, right, the founder, with like game design and game ideas and how levels should be, and just, kind of snowballed out of control from there. But yeah, I mean, I came up, making games from knowing nothing to, trying to make a game for the past, I want to say 9 years it's been since I kind of started on this journey after college, all while working a full-time job. I've been working in IT since then as well. Uh, so yeah, I kind of, I do IT throughout the day and then moonlight game developer by night. And that's, yeah, basically been my life for the past 9 years.
Well, thank you for that. And that's pretty it's kind of trying to think of the right way to put it. Um, I that's pretty interesting, like going from knowing absolutely nothing as, most people tend to, do. And then, sort of jumping in with like game jams and like managing to get a little group together where it doesn't sound like many of you or any of you had really an idea. So it sounded like all of you kind of just jumped in on that journey together at the same time. Am I correct in that?
Oh yeah. So the guys that I called my friends, incredibly talented artists, right? Of many mediums, but at the time never touched anything related to game art. The people that they brought along, were like programmers, had never touched games, but loved. We have a shared passion for games, and so some programmers and a writer was a buddy of ours too. That was also like an artist, Photoshop master. So when we got together, none of us knew how to really make a game, so we all kind of started that journey together. And it was really interesting when we started doing our first game jams, where we started. I mean, we started working on like a project on a thing for like a while, and it wasn't until we really started hitting game jams that we started learning a lot. So game jams were a huge help to us, even early on, which is a tip. If anybody wants to get into game development, do game jams. They really help out. Uh, they really help you like get into the groove and learn things that you wouldn't really quickly.
So then, Pedro, would it be fair to say, because you kind of got ahead of me there, I think maybe, but
Sorry, yeah,
do you,
I'm
no,
sorry.
perfectly fine. Do you think that it would be fair then to say that your words of wisdom would be find a game jam, jump into a game jam?
Yeah, all the time. The game jams are an incredible learning opportunity in a small period of time that's really hardcore, right? They're anywhere from like 2 to 3 days, sometimes even a week. That's like a longer one. But it's one of those things that we learned so much every time we did one. We just got better and better at it. We always explore something new, something we've never done, and that was a really big thing. There's a long laundry list of tips I'd give people, but that's definitely one of them.
And that's like that's fair enough. I've spoken to a lot of people, and like some of the like a lot of people have done game jams, and that's far be it for me to try and like say otherwise, because it's like you said, it's a smart thing to do. You get in there, and like from other people I've spoken to that have talked about it as well, it's like it's a nice easy way to not have to think too hard about the game that you're going to do. Like you kind of just get given you get given like the spec sheet of like the three main things and just run with it, right?
Mhm.
Or what have you, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's the you're kind of given like the what's cool about game jams is that they always have like a theme or something, but you don't have to adhere to it too much if you don't want to. We mainly use it as a time to come together, meet people, and work on something. Doesn't matter if it adhered to the theme or not, just work on anything, right? Because I feel that like that's the secret sauce, right? Just to have work on something. Doesn't matter what it is, just do it. Because that's where the learning is gonna really come from.
Yeah, and that also touches on some notes of like just doing it, right? Like just trying
Yep.
to get something out there, not trying to make like the magnum opus when that's like your first
Yep.
project.
Yep.
Uh,
That's a lot of people's first mistakes, mine included.
so what you're
Yeah.
saying is you did try and make that dream game out the gate, and everyone went, "Oh no, what have we done?"
100%. Yeah. You know, and we ran into a wall real quick. So yeah, yeah.
Well,
That's where confidence dives.
Uh, like as based on my own experience in life, yes, I can understand that. Like the moment there's the sink and swim mentality, but sometimes you still need to be able to spring off that deep end so you don't sink, right? And if you can't get to that bottom, then it really is just a nightmare that just makes everything so much harder to even get up to the surface again, right?
Yeah, I feel that jumping into what is game dev, especially without any knowledge, people don't realize how difficult game development is. And I'm talking like for anybody, even multi-million dollar companies and projects. It's a miracle that any game releases in any form off the bat. And then for an independent developer just starting, has no idea what they're doing, if they stick to it, it's a difficult road. Which hopefully they will enjoy in their own way. But it is difficult to climb back up after you take that fall, after you realize what the the size of what you're trying to do really is, and what you're trying to accomplish, and what you're trying to do, even in a small version. Like everybody, another tip is like start really small. When people think about a project, you talk to any experienced developer, and they're going to tell you think even smaller. What is the smallest version of what you're trying to do? Simplest, smallest thing, and that's where you go. And you try to make that small thing happen, either at a game jam or in your own time, and then work it from there. Because it's not a pool, it's an ocean, right? And it's some people like to jump into the deep end of that ocean and then get lost on the way back to shore to try to start the right way.
Yeah, and another I think another kind of important thing to touch on there was that like it's in and you kind of alluded to it, and it's an iterative project, not project process. Like when you start small and when you release things in kind of baby steps, small projects, as you said, go even smaller, right? But like
Hmm.
that's a foundation for yourself that you're building on. So intentionally or otherwise, the more you work on things and you get the first time you try and make like a character walk across a line, or like a level that you made, that
Hmm.
could be like a week long process just to make it work. But then the next time you do it, it's a few days, and then like by the end of when you start the next game jam, well, that's like a 30-second thing because you've done it like 50 times and you have it ingrained in your essence, your being, right?
Right, right. The first time that we made anything move across any kind of map, it took us quite a while, and we had a huge celebration after we got that to work. I think it was literally just like a log jumping from one side of the screen to the other because we didn't have another asset. It was just we put a log like a stick, and we made it fly. And we're like, "Oh my god, we figured it out!" And that was a crazy moment. At like 3 in the morning, we're like, "Whoa, we don't know what's going on." Yeah, that was huge. Now it's like you look back on it, and you're like, "Oh man, that was crazy." But yeah, it's come a long way.
Yeah, exactly. So, Pedro, you mentioned that you liked games. You like, you wanted to do them. Was there a game that made you like want to make games? Like, did you when you were younger, or maybe a little older, like, was there a game that you played and you're like, this is the game that I want to try and do? Like,
You know, there was many different games that influenced me growing up. I think the first game I could ever remember, which I played in Cuba, funny enough, well, I think it was like Galaga, right? When I got to this country, my aunt had got me a Nintendo, and I had like Mario 2 and Mario 3, and those are like my first like big games here. Um, and I think that those kind of really stuck to me. Fast forward a couple years, I saw Mega Man X. That was a huge thing for me, right? But as I kept getting older, games got better and better. I think a game that had a huge impact on what I wanted to do as like a big game, or like the Final Fantasy series, particularly like 7, 10, and 12. Final Fantasy 12, which is my favorite of all time. It's the best game. Um, and that is one major game that had a huge impact on me. That after I graduated and all the game that I wanted to make harkened a little bit back to like a Final Fantasy like RPG esque kind of thing, which one day I still want to do. Um, but yeah, I mean, Final Fantasy 12 and like Mega Man were two really big games that had a lot of impact on me and like what I wanted to do, right? And like the gold standard for like a game for me. Like if I were to make a game, like these these are gold standards.
So two questions that I'm going to follow up with this, and one of them is kind of leads into like another question I do typically ask. But for Mega Man, was there like a specific Mega Man for you that was like, oh, this is the gold standard of Mega Mans in your mind?
Mega Man X, first one, and this is coming from me. I love Mega Man. I've played almost every Mega Man game, Mega Man Battle Networks, the OG Mega Man, the newer ones, Mega Man and Base. And then the X series is probably my favorite because I felt it was a little more accessible than like the older Mega Mans, which are a little harder. And then X, X, X2, X3, X4, X5. Funny enough, the one I've played the most has been X5. Um, so besides X1, I think my favorite is probably X5. But yeah, the Mega Man X game, particularly because for like a 2D side scroller, right, which Elsie I guess is a 2D side scroller as well. It its moveset is very simple to understand. It's very precise, and it just feels really good for a game that came out at that time. It's like, oh man, the game feel of this game is almost perfect. Like the dashing is awesome, the jumping is awesome, shooting's great, right? It's not even much about the story, but like the art was really cool. Like the themes, right? I've always liked a lot of games that have like really cool themes, so I'm always like, oh, the bosses are like these animals that are robots. Like I thought that's always super cool, which I feel we took a lot of influence from that kind of thing into Elsie. Some of Elsie's bosses are like these robotic animals. Uh, and yeah, I mean that for sure. Mega Man X uh, was probably my favorite one, like to come out of and the one that's influenced me the most, for sure.
So like, I can definitely understand and agree with that. I think a lot of people probably can because Mega Man X right out the gate somehow. And I say somehow just because it was um it was still Mega Man at its core, right? But it still evolved a fair bit between like Mega
Yeah,
Man X8, I think was the Super Nintendo one, and then X. But yeah,
Mega
no,
Man 8, yeah, 8.
they they somehow like managed to nail borderline perfect game feel like right away. And it was like looking back on it, the iterations between like you can if you look at like the Mega Man games from Nintendo, there's a lot of iterations. There's a lot of like building on a lot of changes. Um, like the charge shot, the slide, the rush, the bird. I think his name was Beat or what have you. But then like X came along and it was you know the only main thing I can think of between one, two, and three is two introduced the dash right away, and
Yeah,
then
but
like
they give you the air dash after,
right,
right? Because that was the power up, right? So that was a big thing too. I love games that change the way the character looks visually. And Mega Man, especially Mega Man X, that gave you like the different armor pieces that you find and completely changes the way that your character looks and plays. That was huge. That was incredible, right? You get the boots. Oh, now you can dash. But in X2, you could already dash. But when you get the boots, you can air dash. And you're like, oh man. So in Mega Man 3, you could already air dash. And it was just it's the whole thing. And it's just I don't know that progression was just great, and they really trained an entire generation to like learn how to play these games like just differently. It was crazy, and then it looked really cool too. Some of the best looking like pixel art, like Capcom masters of the craft.
yes, 100%. Like that was peak Capcom. I think um, anyone that has played Capcom games from like the Super Nintendo era, they were truly at their prime. And if anyone listening has not played a lot of Super Nintendo like 16-bit era Capcom, you definitely should because it was something else. Like they knew what they were doing. They knew how to make use of they knew how to make use of like every like amount of sprite space or what have you, whatever the proper terminology is. But they knew how to make use of everything they were doing, and it was all fantastic. You look at some games from that era, and like it's muddy, it's serviceable. I want to say because it is what it is, right? Um, Not to try and like shame some games I can't think off the top of my head. It's just like they're in there, just not the names. But then like Capcom, just everything they did was just absolutely
Yeah, yeah,
just top tier quality, right?
yep, incredible. Like it really is. And
So
I mean, there was even some games like I mean, yeah, there's some games that had they're kind of my next set is like clear, clear. I guess like visual communication, right? Like, it was. I can talk about the game forever.
Yeah, like I agree. Like it was, kind of like you said, uh, like the way they did the animals, the way they did everything. It was, it was very like they knew what they were trying to do. It wasn't like they were experimenting. The message was from the get-go, the message was straightforward. Like they did their homework before showing up to the test or whatever, right?
Yeah, yeah, 100%.
Now, Pedro, you mentioned, you mentioned Final Fantasy 12 as your favorite Final Fantasy.
Yes.
And I am curious if you can speak to that, like what was it about 12 that like set it apart from 7, that set it apart from 10 for you?
Oh man, whew, big question. Uh, this for me, right? For me personally, there was a lot of things. So I was already a fan of the Evilist world, right? I liked Final Fantasy Tactics, Tactics Advance. They were super cool already. I was already in, right, in with the whole world. But then the world design of the levels, the story was really political, very Game of Thronesy, right? Before I even knew what that was. This was in what 2006, 2007, the game released. Um, how like very political, which I loved. The way that there was no real main character, like every character in the story was a main character, and I feel that's kind of the first time that Final Fantasy did something like that. Uh, where every character was important to the story, right? Whether it was like Ash or Captain Bosch or Balthier, and everybody had their own like motivations, and like the story kind of weaved between all of them. The art direction is I feel was pretty timeless as well. It didn't try to go for a realistic look. It tried to go for a more stylized, like pastel look. That when it got remastered on PS4, it looked like it just came out. Because it has such a stylized, like art style. And then it was also, I think, the first Final Fantasy, I guess, besides 11, which is the MMO, that had no random like encounters. Although all the enemies were out in the world, you see them, you go attack them if you want. You don't, if you don't, if you don't want to, you kind of skirt around them. Which to me that was an incredible like choice, and it was an awesome thing to see. It was enough of a departure from the formula to give it something fresh and new that I enjoyed. And then that game was massive. All like like there's so much to do, so many secrets. You can beat the whole story and miss half of the game's content. Um, which was a lot. I mean, and Final Fantasy is known for that, but I feel this one was just really big. Um, and so yeah, I don't know. For me, it kind of did everything. It had every wish list item that I wanted from other Final Fantasies in the game, and then some. And then just the whole experience, right? The I guess like the not just the theming, but like the way that they did all the like all the levels, right? I love all the locales. I don't know, so many things that they did right for me. It was great.
So, yeah, that thank you for sharing that because I haven't played a lot of Final Fantasy 12. I think at some point years ago I started it and it's always been on my list to get back to. It's just, the backlog is huge and always growing, and also it's a Final
Always.
Fantasy game. So it's even harder to try and balance out what you already know is going to be like a 40, 60, 80 hour game, right?
Yep.
But from what I played of it, back on the PS2, yeah, it very much was a change of pace from what you'd otherwise expect from any other Final Fantasy game. And I liked it personally because, um, like you kind of touched on as well as you're back to Ivalice, right? And
Yep.
for those that don't know, Ivalice is like where all of the Final Fantasy Tactics games are set. Um, if I'm not mistaken, I also believe uh, Tactics in the Ivalice world, let's call that, is what has introduced like a handful of like staple classes or races now, I think, and they've kind of moved forward. I don't know if that's unique to Ivalice or if it's kind of also moved out, but like I don't think the bunny people, not the Moogles, but like
Yeah,
the
the
bunny people.
Vieras. Yeah, the Vieras were introduced in Tactics, right? Yeah.
I think I think
Tactics
the DS
Advanced, one
or
of the
the Game
two.
Boy one. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, Tactics Advanced introduced the Vieras and the type of Mughals that are that version, and there's a couple other a couple of the races that belong to that world, right? Like the Bangas, which are like the lizard people. They're like these new moves, which are like these. They almost look like Eeyore, but like standing on two legs. Just these nice like dudes. Yeah, but I mean, Vieras became really popular now. They're like an entire race in Final Fantasy 14, for example, like hugely popular.
Yeah, and everyone like they're not uh just creatures. They're like intelligent. They have
Yeah, yeah,
agency,
yeah,
right? And
yeah,
like so I always liked that it introduced things that were not just like standard humans, so to say, right?
yeah,
Or people kind of thing. Like they expanded it, right? Um, but I really liked the Evolus setup because I played Tactics a lot. I played the Game Boy Tactics game a lot. So like for
played
me,
that a ton.
it was a nice world to like to be back into and be like, oh yeah, like and they're talking about like some history and you recognize it. It's it felt nice to play a Final Fantasy game where it was in a world with history that you actually have experienced before,
Yeah,
as opposed to just having to read about and be like, oh yeah, the war from like 100 years ago, and you're like, yeah, okay, cool. But then you like
yeah,
play an Evolus game, you're like, oh yeah, the war, like the War of the Lions is referenced. You're like, oh yeah, that I was there for that, you know?
yeah, yeah, yeah. All of those, and then just like the cities were inspired by a lot of different cultures. Like Rabbi Nasser was really cool, but then you have like the judges and how they presented the judges in 12, whereas what you know of them in like the Tactics Advance game, right? And it's like they're these whole thing. The Empire was just the airships make like a huge like the airships in 12 are a huge deal, right? Because in 12 the summons in the game aren't the traditional like Shiva, Ifrit, Bahamut, none of that. They're those the summons are other ones that are from the evilest world, right? So in Tactics and Tactics Advance, the summons that you get are different, right? They're like Famfrit, um, and just other ones, right? But then the airships in 12 are all named after the original summons. They all look crazy. I was like, that was another thing that really like drew me to it. Like, that's really cool.
Now, I'm gonna ask this, and I'm sorry if this is taking a shot at your favorite Final Fantasy game,
Hit me.
but how did it feel that you had to learn how to put a hat on when you first played it?
Oh, I didn't mind the job board at all. I thought it was fine. I thought it made a lot of sense. Although now that since you played it in PS2, the Zodiac version is out, which is the international version, that is different. It's pretty cool. But yeah, I didn't mind. I thought I was like, oh, it was an interesting way to do progression. You can't wear certain item or whatever. You can't use a certain weapon until you've learned it on your job board. I thought it was okay. I didn't have any issues with it
I'll
personally.
say this for those that aren't aware of, the what I just asked, because you kind of touched on the international version, and the new one is the Zodiac version, which was
Yeah.
just the international version.
Mhm.
For those that are not aware, Final Fantasy 12 when it first came out, and it still kind of has the job board, if I'm not mistaken. Just they
Yes.
revamped it a lot.
Yep.
Um, the the extensiveness or specificity of how that worked originally was like you had to unlock the ability to wear gloves, wear a hat, use a shield, wear boots. And when it first came out it was um kind of controversial just because the joke was, and I think VG Cats was one of the things, real old there, but VG Cats was one of the things that like first made the joke about it was, like, oh yeah, how stupid do you think I am to not know how to put on a hat? And then you just see the character walking around with like hats on their feet or something like that, and them going, well, maybe I should learn how to use it, right? Um, so that's what that was, because it is, for those that have played the new one, or the better version, I guess you would say. Um, yeah, it was kind of weird, but like you said, a lot of it did make sense, unlocking it, because it makes sense that you would have to learn how to use like a two-handed sword differently than a one-handed sword, right?
Yeah, and then there's different levels to them. It's like, oh, you like hat one. Okay, your hat one, it's like it has these three hats that you can use, and then hat two has like these other ones, or like sword one, sword two, and they have like a list of like the swords that you can learn that you've learned to use. And I think that was fine. What's cool about the Zodiac version is that before in the original there were no classes, so everybody had the same job board, and I think they just started in different locations. But the Zodiac version has classes, and each class has a specific job board that you fill out for that class only. So that was pretty cool. That was like the big difference. If you know, obviously, apart from like rebalancing and stuff, that was like a major difference between the original and the international slash Zodiac version.
And that sounds like a much like a huge lifesaver for some people because like I can't speak for other people, but I 100% imagine um I would have probably started pushing buttons and ended up with absolutely useless characters just trying to make them all do things they're not built for. So
Yeah,
having
you'd be
it
surprised.
more,
Yeah, yeah. That's a big thing. Without structure, people, just gonna start putting whatever.
which to some people min-maxing is fantastic, but you have to know what you're doing when it comes to min-maxing. You go in blind and you end up making someone that can't do anything well in the slightest.
Yeah, yeah. You can easily come up with characters that are not great, and we'll have a hard time in the late game.
Or early game. Like I think I screwed myself over right out the gate.
It's quite possible, 100%.
So, Pedro, I am curious because, we talked a little bit about Mega Man X, we talked a little bit about Final Fantasy 12. What is it that makes games enjoyable to you?
I feel that has changed as I've gotten older. When I was young, any games that I mean, one thing that hasn't changed, I love colorful games. Any games that has a lot of color, a lot of saturation, I love. I don't care if it's too busy. I think just looking at pretty colors, I don't know, gives me a sense of calm for some reason. I don't know, a sense of satisfaction. When I was young, I was fine. Like anything 2D was really cool. When we started going into like 3D games, loved open world games. Anything that lets you run around, in an open field, and even like like Spyro or like Ocarina of Time, right? When I was young, I never actually played a Link to the Past or like any of the old like Zeldas. My first Zelda was Ocarina, and just it lets you just be in this world and do whatever you wanted, right? That was a huge thing for me. And then so when like Final Fantasy 12 came out and let me do that in a Final Fantasy setting, that was huge for me too, right? So that was pretty big, and that I loved kind of open worlds and like like the Ubisoft formula started coming up, right? But first it started with like Assassin's Creed, the original. I love that game. I love Assassin's Creed series. It gets a lot of hate. Some people it's like, oh, it's too much, it's kind of whatever. I love those games. Uh, and I still do. And it was just like, oh, that open worldness. But as I've gotten older, open world has become a little too taxing for me, where I don't have as much time, right? Ever since I started making game, I've had less time to kind of play more games. Um, so I've started to enjoy more streamlined, like linear games, right, or more story driven games like Uncharted, The Last of Us. I mean, I recently just played God of War and it was great. Or any action games, any games that have an end. I I'm more for now than any games that have like massive open worlds. Which I talk about that, but the game, like probably my favorite game of all time is World of Warcraft. I still play it, but there's no end to that game. That's a different part of the brain.
And I can definitely relate to that. And I think a lot of people can relate to that. Like I spoke to someone a while back, and it was right around the time like the rumblings on Twitter for like the call for this started happening, and it was like stop making big expensive AAA games. Make 10-hour AA games, or like deliver smaller experiences. Make like a 4-hour game, make a 5-hour game, like what have you, what have you. And like there was some people were pushing back on that, but there was a lot of people calling for that, being like, oh no, I'd love to be able to sit down for a weekend, like on a Saturday and a Sunday, and just play through a game that has like a beginning, a middle, and an end, right? Because at that point you can say out loud, "Oh, I beat this game," but it's not like with something that follows the Ubisoft model, like Assassin's Creed, Far Cry, what have you, what have you, what have you, where like you do the main story and then a bunch of other things, but you look at the map and there's just endless amounts of things for you still left to like look into doing, right? And you're like, well, I'm not finished. And like,
Right. I mean, there was a couple games that I think did that model, but in a way that I found pleasant, right? Infamous, Second Son specifically, I loved, and it kind of had that model where the story wasn't very long, and the stuff that you do in the world wasn't groundbreaking, but the character moves so good, and the the main mechanics of the game were so good that I loved and I didn't mind. The second game that did that, and it was a AAA game, the story was maybe like 12 hours long. And I think the full game for Completionist, I don't think it was any more than like 20 or 25 hours. Spider-Man for the PS4. Spider-Man is an excellent game where it is the highest quality, is short and sweet, and a lot of extra stuff to do that isn't groundbreaking, but the mechanics make it fun, right? And not so much of a chore.
For both of those titles, I will agree completely with you. They were, I played all of the Infamous games. But the Second Son, I will agree completely. Like that one introduced a nice change of pace to everything to always keep it fresh, and it also didn't overstay its welcome. Right? It was as long as it needed to be, and same for Spider-Man. So yeah, I
Yep.
agree with both of those things you said.
Yeah, I thought those games really perfected that style of gameplay. It's like, oh, it's open world and there's stuff to do. It's like I love Horizon Zero Dawn. I thought the game was massive and I didn't do everything. But I did a lot. But even then, I was like, oh, maybe there's a little too many things here. They're all cool, and the game is gorgeous. It's probably one of my favorite looking games. The game is beautiful ever since the first moment I saw it. I'm like, oh, robot dinosaurs, but like, you have like bow and arrow, and it's like green and it has really colorful. I'm like, this is perfect. Uh, but it was a lot, and for somebody with not a lot of time, and also have like a huge backlog, right? Like you said, I want to play a lot of games, so I can't take a million hours on one of them. And when I do, it's like last massive game I played was a Persona 5 a few years ago when it came out. That game was 95 hours with no extras. Like that was just me going through it. And I'm like, okay, I can't do that all the time, you know? It was like, oh, crazy.
Yeah, and yeah, like I can definitely relate to that. And that kind of what you said kind of leads into the next thing about, you have other things to do. Like you have a life to balance. You can't just give 95 hours to every game that comes along, right? So with that in mind, when it comes to balancing your life and trying to like not always be spending 95 hours or what have you playing a game,
Yeah.
what other kind of hobbies do you have and enjoy outside of gaming? And if gaming is all there is to it, that is also a completely valid answer. I don't want to make it
Done.
sound like I'm expecting more to this than that.
No, I mean gaming is definitely a huge part of my life. Right, like playing games. I love playing games, whether it's on my own, on my PS5 or whatever on console, multiplayer. Or playing with friends, like World of Warcraft, League of Legends. Whatever it may be. I do spend a lot of my time playing games. It's a lot of time. I also love watching movies. It's probably like my second favorite thing to do after games, which it's a different medium. I feel after I started playing games, I started getting more analytical with the products that I consume. Like it's kind of difficult to turn it off. But now when I play a game or I watch a movie, I'm like, oh, why did they do this way? Why did they get that shot? Oh, that line was pretty good. Oh, the line could have been better. Whatever, this or that. And I just start picking at it all the time because I love games. I love movies, right? And I love that medium. And it's just something now that I can't stop doing. But yeah, I do watch a lot of movies. Me and my wife, watch a ton of movies. Or I'm always looking out for a good restaurant. I love eating. This is one of the things that I really just enjoy. I enjoy my time uh, eating. I'm not a very outdoorsy person. My wife and I don't really do many things outside. We're fairly big homebodies. Um, but yeah, I mean, my life really revolves around games, making them, playing them. Fun enough, I don't like to watch people play games like online. It's not a thing for me. Like, I can't just watch somebody on Twitch all day. But I don't know. It's cool if you can do it. I think that's a skill. But yeah, no, I cannot. But yeah. I mean, most of what I do is just play more video games casually. Nowadays, I don't have a lot of time, so I don't finish. It takes me a long time. My wife, when she plays a game, she'd be the new God of War in like a weekend. It took me like a month or something, just chipping away at it little by little. And then one weekend, this last weekend, I actually just beat it. Just sat down. I'm like, I'm gonna power through this. Just ride.
And like that's fair. It's understandable. Like I also have trouble playing, committing to beating some games. And I always like the kind of games I like to indulge on are the kind of games that take way too long to play. Like right
Yep.
now, and I've said this before. But like my guilty pleasure right now is like Cyberpunk, and the problem with that is it's an okay game. It's a serviceable game,
Right.
but like the amount of stuff to do is is like the stuff I like to do. It's enough. There's always a piece of candy to go after, right? So like I can
Yep.
understand not the trying to like make time for that, but then having to like eventually just say screw it, sit down, commit to it. Now, I am curious. I'm gonna like, ask you two quick follow ups to what you
Mm.
said. Because you said you're in Miami. I know, not from personal experience, but like the Kevin Bacon of personal experience. My father is in Florida. He
All
worked in
right.
Miami for a long time. Um, so like, when it comes to going out to eat, 'cause you mentioned that. Do you have like a favorite restaurant in Miami? There we go. That's the question I was trying to get to.
That's that is always changing. I'm not gonna lie.
Fair enough.
Miami is one of those places that I feel is so diverse, right? I mean, we're obviously known for a lot of like Hispanic or Latino food or Latino, cultures, right? And there's restaurants, even some restaurants are always like mixing up different ones, but then when you start mixing up other things and people with a lot of different heritage, like heritage and like backgrounds are here, right? Like for example, some of my favorite restaurants right now are, I believe, from this chef that like his family comes from Italy, but I think he might have been like Argentinian or something, right? So it's like this like Italian restaurant with like pastas that are really good, but then it's like another restaurant that's like a fusion of different things, or like um this other person that has a like a Korean, Japanese, Cuban fusion restaurant, and her family is like from Cuba and has like a very well known Cuban restaurant in Miami, and she started kind of like her own thing, right? And it's these are places that I frequent a lot because I mean those I love it, but every day there's something new. Although I will say my favorite food is are burgers, and I am a burger connoisseur. I need to know where the best burgers in South Florida are at all times. Whenever I go traveling, could be anywhere in the world. I always tell my wife I have to find a burger spot. I have to find what is considered the best burger spot where we are. Um, and that's huge. For me, like it's a never ending quest because there's so many popping up all the time, and it honestly really surprises me.
That is
Uh,
completely that is completely fair. It's burgers are really easy to throw out there, but they can be difficult to actually throw out well, right?
100%. I think that funny enough for me, my favorite kind of burger is very simple burgers. You have like meat, cheese, maybe onions, and a nice bread, like a nice bun, right? Sometimes I my friends make fun of me, but I always judge a burger first and foremost based on the kind of bread that they use. Uh, if it's like a brioche bun or if it's like a something out of the ordinary, right? Something that goes along like well, like really well with it. I mean, here in Miami, I've seen some burgers on like Cuban breaded, which are delicious. Love Cuban bread. Um, but yeah, like burgers are you can hide a lot of like imperfections with a lot of ingredients, but I think that just ends up tasting like weird. You lose the burger taste. And some of my favorite burgers down here are just a couple ingredients, just done really well.
So yeah, good, good to I'm happy that you are able to find have it's going to sound really weird and I apologize. It's not meant to sound condescending, but I know it can. I'm very happy that you when you like go traveling or whatever, you have a goal in mind for the place that you are. Like I had a similar goal when I would visit my dad in Florida or when we first started traveling around. Like my in my mind I'm like, "Oh, I want to find a place that does good burgers as well." So like I know I know saying having a goal in
Yes.
mind can sound very condescending. However, it's for those that don't go traveling with like a goal, like a weird esoteric goal, you should try it because it makes it all the more entertaining when
Yeah.
you actually achieve that weird esoteric goal.
Yeah, I keep telling people, and I think one of my favorite burgers of all time, it was in Barcelona, Spain. Go figure. super simple burger too. It was it's like like burger, like a patty, which was really solid. Um, a thick slice of like I want to say brie cheese or goat cheese, one of the two. Might have been goat cheese, caramelized onions, and then on a bun that resembled a Cuban bun but a little sweeter, like a Cuban bread but a little sweeter. That was it. Incredible burger. Like knocked my socks off.
Well, that's good to know. If I, you know, that the burger scene in Barcelona might actually be, might be going good.
That's great.
So, Pedro, I would be remiss if I did not actually talk to you about, you know, the game Night Shift Games that is making Elsie. I would be remiss if I didn't, bring it up. And I there's a few things I want to kind of touch on or go with it. Um, One was, the for those that don't know, for those that didn't see Elsie when it first debuted at PAX, and I think it still might be up on your itch page, the original look
Oh,
and feel of
yes.
it. Um, but and the gameplay I remember when I first went. I don't remember what PAX it was. It was probably like I actually don't know. I don't know if it was
I think the
East,
first time
West.
that Alex showed that game off, it was PAX South. Uh,
Oh, wow.
and
Okay.
yeah, and I don't know if you saw that one. Before Elsie had like a blue coat, she had black hair. The gameplay was like single room waves that you clear the room and then you go into the teleporter and it takes you into like the next room. That was the original Elsie. Or rather the Elsie version before I came on board. When I came on board, we revamped the entire game, entire look, the art direction, the gameplay, like the layout, the levels, everything. And that version we showcased at PAX West of 2019, September 2019. Yeah, that was the
So
first
that
time we showcased that game.
so that means in my case, it definitely was the the PAC South because that is where I would have got the card from, the original business card that
Mm.
I put up there. That for I don't know how, but has somehow just like has been floating around my desk ever since. But then the next year, and I can say this like with kind of like the authority because I have one of the other pins from PAX, the newer design pin sitting up on my pin board right now. So that
Uh,
explains the gap there. So
yeah.
that means in 1 year, basically, there was the and forgive me if I put it this way because I could be entirely off base, but the core concept of the game would have been similar enough. So I'm not gonna say like the entire game was revamped, but in 1 year a good amount of gameplay was maybe I'm gonna say upgraded or quote unquote finger quotes there upgraded or what have you. But the overall art style in 1 year, that's a big change for one
Yeah.
year, which is very impressive to like in all honesty, that's like very impressive to change, um, to make that much of a leap. Like a whole redesign. A
Yep.
lot of stuff you'll see in a year, tweaks or what have you. But this was a big change, and I remember in both cases when I tried it at both PAXs that I liked, or I don't know if I physically got my hands on it. I watched at the very least. I got to see
Mm.
it. But yeah, no, like, and since then there's a demo now that you can download and what have you. But like, um, for regardless of, I just want to say I was hooked, and I'm looking forward to it coming out, in whatever iteration I guess you would say it's released
You and
at.
me both. You and me both. It's been a it's been a long time coming. It's been a long time in production. It's been a super long journey. Even for Alex, which started the game, that first version that you played. When I got brought on board, and he told me, "Oh, if you can help us with our social media presence," I was the one that told him like, "I'll do it, but we have to change the way that this game looks. We're gonna have to sell it in a different way." And that's when I brought along on board Bryant, which was our initial art director for the revamp, and he redesigned Elsie first. and then we started redesigning what the levels would look like, the style, just the style of the game. We're really trying to go for something completely different, a little more out there. And even today, I tell people like we're not afraid to do things differently than other pixel art games, where we pixel art purists might not like us for some things, because like for example, we don't set a limit on like the kind of colors that we use, and or like a limited palette, or whatever. We're using modern tools and modern techniques and modern modern style, just, and then pixel art is just the medium, but not without the usual like limitations that people will put on themselves about it. To the point that we even have like non-pixel art effects and like assets in the game. Right, like our portraits are not pixel art, our menus are not going to be pixel art. Some like muzzle flashes, bullets are not going to be pixel art, and that's okay. We're trying to blend like a lot of different things to this game to make it something that's really unique, right? And something that you don't see often. Because I mean, sometimes it's when you break the rules, it can turn out really bad. So I'm trying to be really hyper aware of when we push it too much. Um, but yeah, we came on board. We wanted to change the entire look. We kind of wanted to just revamp everything. The game went from being like rooms to room, like wave thing, to being like like left to right, where we generate the rooms procedurally, right? We hand make all the rooms and we stitch them together in random order, right? And it just, yeah, I don't know. The game, it got a little bigger in scope than I think what Alex intended, and yeah, it always happens, I guess. But and we looked for a long time. We looked for like a publisher that would kind of help us push it to the finish line as well. And that took a while in itself.
And if you don't mind speaking to this, just because I don't know a whole lot about this, and I don't know how much other people might be aware of this as well. But it was on oh man, I'm gonna feel bad about maybe not remembering the right Indieland is what the completionist does, correct?
Handyland is, wait, sorry, can you repeat that?
Um, the completionist, where it was a story I think that was shared by at his event, at his as
Oh,
his
okay.
like charity indie event. Um,
Yes.
um, and I apologize if I'm way off base with how I understood it, but it sounded like you guys managed to uh, win him over, and he was part of how you guys got a publisher. Am I correct
Yeah.
on that? Or
Gerard is a saint. Okay, Gerard is one of the best people I've ever met in the space. Honestly, he is really caring. He will just, help people out. And yeah, that's 100% true. Gerard became, you know, our producer and, part publisher, uh, during Indieland. This last year that we did Indieland, not this last year because it was the live version, but the year before, right, 2021. That was the second year that we had done Indieland. We met Gerard briefly at PAX East 2020. It was the last PAX before COVID shut down everything. He played our game briefly. He enjoyed it, and then one of the guys on his team, Michael Barity, he came up to us, played it, loved it, and he's like, "Hey, would you guys be interested in participating in this event? We raise money for dementia awareness or dementia research." And we're like, yeah, no, that totally sign us up. We did Indieland 2020 that year. It went great. At the time, we were already fielding for publishers. We were in talks with a couple of publishers at the time. Unfortunately, none of those panned out. And then, fast forward a year, Indieland 2021. We brought a lot of hype to the stream, and we were with him. And then in the stream, we're like, hey, we are looking for publishers. If everybody is interested, you always hit us up. Right after the stream ended, right before he went away, he told us, he's like, "Hey guys, just give me a chance to finish the Indieland show. We'll catch up, right after, and I'm gonna get you guys, I'm gonna introduce you guys to some people." And yeah, he definitely made it happen. Yeah, introduced us to the owner of Platonic Games, Gavin, and we pitched him the game. He saw our production, he saw our schedule, saw what we already had done, like the game, like the style. And Gerard is behind us 100%. And he is part publishing it and producing it. And that was just huge, right? That was a big thing for us because we were trying for a long time to kind of get a publisher, just find somebody, right? Somebody to kind of help us get it through the finish line. And it was, we were already kind of, it was, it was not amazing, right? To kind of be on the hook for so long with a bunch of different people to then never really pan out. Uh, and then, he really got us. He held our hands to that door, right? And goes like, you guys are gonna have your shot. So I'm eternally thankful to him and to his entire team, to like Mike and then all the people at Platonic. They've been excellent so far. So yeah, good stuff.
And that's great to hear. And there was something else I want to ask, and it's not explicitly about that, but it's kind of in the same space. And I don't know if this is if you can't really speak to it, or what have you. I honestly don't know. It's just I haven't spoken to anyone that can maybe have this uh this kind of experience, this kind of I want to say like viewpoint, I guess you'd say. And
Mhm.
with more and more bigger names kind of getting in some way or another into helping people publish games, or in the case of like Donkey actually trying to start their own publishing company.
Aboard
um
Donkey. I love Donkey. I love that dude. People will never know, but that is the shyest person I've ever met. He's so nice.
um which yeah, I've seen a few interviews with him, and yeah, he does seem very um um counter to his like online persona.
Yep.
I think that's the best way to put it. But and again, I apologize if this is like just a question that you're gonna be like, wait, I can't speak to
No,
that. But
I'll let you know.
how do you think the current future, I guess you'd say, as we're getting more people like that wanting to put themselves behind games, or like you kind of, the way you said it with Gerard, like he was behind you the whole way, like took you like led you guys to where you needed to be. Do you think that is something that's going to become more common as we see, streamers getting, or not streamers, what I mean, personalities, I
Yeah,
guess you'd say,
content creators, personalities. Yeah,
getting
yeah.
bigger and wanting to help make a difference themselves, and like put get stuff that they are also can feel passionate about into certain directions. I apologize if that question doesn't make any sense.
No, I no, it makes perfect sense. I think that's a thing that I feel a lot of people are starting to talk about. And the really big move there was with Donkey, right? So he's on publisher. It got a lot of attention, whether it was good or bad, right? Like some people were like, oh, he doesn't know anything and it's gonna be terrible, or some people were like, hey, it's gonna be great, right? It really depends on how they handle it. I think it's a great thing. Anybody that wants to help fund independent games is good in my book, right? Whether they don't know anything about making games, like I didn't know anything about making games, right? But like are willing to learn and willing to do it the right way, then I think it's an absolute positive for the industry and for creators, especially smaller creators. Like the first game that Big Mode, his new publisher, is coming up with is a looks like a very lovely game, right? That I feel would have a hard time, kind of making it without somebody like him kind of behind it, but also something that showed me that I feel maybe quieted. I don't know if that's a word, but like it kind of like toned down some of like the haters that he had. I was like, oh, he thinks he knows, how to make video games because he plays video games. It's like no, he found some really good people to help him with this project, right? Like this person, Dan Edelman, used to be the head of indies at Nintendo for years, and then left and started doing his own like indie consulting, right? One of his biggest games that he consulted on was Axiom Verge, right? And he really helped that developer the entire way through. And when he's reaching out to like legit people, right, that know what they're doing, right, so then he can also learn how to do this properly. I think it's just great, right? And I feel that maybe his game, like the game that he's publishing now, is probably going to be under a lot of scrutiny when it comes out because of like the whole thing. It's also going to get a lot of attention. Um, and I feel that's probably going to happen with any big like personality or whatever that tries to jump into the space. But I think it's great. Like I think it's awesome that they're also giving back to the process that that people go through to make the things that they love, and I've let them kind of have this career. So I'm up for it.
And thank you for answering that. And like, I apologize if I know that one kind of came out of left field. It was just, like I said, you're the first person that I've actually been able to, kind of ask their take on that. Just because, in some way or another, you guys are in like the same kind of Venn diagram. And like I understand what you're saying, and I think, it's you kind of you might not have said it in the exact same words that I would, but it's to kind of summarize, it's if someone is passionate about something, about a game that they've seen, and they want to ensure that thing that they're passionate about, they want to see made. And if what their role is ensuring that money gets to that person so that that project can continue to exist. That's
Yeah.
that's huge for an indie game, for a small game, where like
Yeah.
it could be someone kind of stretched to their limits, taking a big chance,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
they're burning the midnight oil every day because they have a day job. It's similar to what you guys are doing, and similar to what a lot of indie games, smaller teams do, where like they need to eat, so they're working their main job, and then their 9 to 5 is like doing IT work or what have you, and
Yep.
then they come home, and for like 4 or 5 hours they're doing what they can, right? And like I understand what you're saying, especially with like when Donkey first released, or not released, announced Big Mode, it got some scrutiny. um I would be lying if I said I did not have a raised eyebrow to it, more or less just because well, what's the play here, like
Right.
what's going to go on. And from day one, my opinion was kind of, and I imagine this was the similar thing to a lot of people, was well, let's see if he puts his money where his mouth is, and in a good way, like a very good way. Let's see if he funds
Right.
games that that he wants to see made, and with the game that they're publishing first, it seems
Animal
that that's
Wow.
what they're doing, and
Looks great.
that's yeah, and that's for me, that was, I lowered my eyebrow at that point, and I hope many others did as well, because at that point you're seeing that, it's because one of the things I read is the concern was that it was going to be, and I imagine like this doesn't just directed at Donkey in the grand scheme of this, right? But I imagine a lot of people will have the like the kind of, let's see if all they're going to do is try and go for like a game that they think will just make big bucks, um, big
Right.
bombastic, or whatever, right? Like a sure thing, so to say. Um, not to speak against the game that they're publishing, um, but the moment that it wasn't something that looked like it was just an easy cash grab. There we go. That's where I was going with that.
Right. It's something that I feel he believed to be an excellent game, right? And
Yeah,
he's happy to make it happen, and I think that's awesome. I will say one thing that I'm sure that they are doing, and I feel that a lot of people probably don't uh either don't realize or understand, or maybe don't even do. Um, us, like the LC team, we've been trying to be at this for a long time. We have studied a lot of the process, not just making games, but then how to manage making games, right? How to use our like budget, whatever it is, to like the best that we can, and try not to go crazy. A lot of people making games don't know how to manage themselves in that way. And sometimes they get into publishing deals where the publisher doesn't really probably do a good job of helping that team manage the project, right? And so that, it'll either they blow through their budget, or they're really behind, and they'll take multiple years after like the budget ran out to really, there's a lot of things, right, that happen. And a lot of the times, like, especially like a lot smaller creators were like, all they want to do is just make this game that they've been trying to make for so long, right, that they hold so close to themselves, um that they a lot of them are not professional developers, a lot of the times. So they don't understand that, either the business side or the production side of it, which is something that I hope publishers help with more in the past, to like smaller studios, right, that they pick up. Sometimes, those are a little more in disarray with like their production, or their scheduling, or their budgeting, right? it's cool that with us we've been really sharp ever since, at least ever since I started getting involved into the project. We've had our ducks in a row like really well. Every time we meet with a publisher, they're like, "Oh man, you guys are doing great, right? You guys are keeping us, updated and organized, and you know where you're going, you know what you want to do, right?" So a lot of the times, some developers don't know, right? So you need somebody on your team as the publisher. I feel also be like the producer that team never had in that sense. Well, that's it's a big thing that I feel doesn't get talked about enough.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, and for there's other or other publishers, other big name developers, what have you, what have you, what have you, that on Twitter every now and then you see them come out and they're like, hey, if you have a publishing offer and you don't know, talk to us, and like because the community, the well-meaning community, I want to say, because there are some, in the past you can find about them that there have been some shady publishers and all this, but by and large, the community wants itself to be healthy, wants everyone to do good, right? So like, yeah, having a good publisher that is behind, um is behind you in more than just saying, hey, we're putting this game out there, and doing like the whole jazz hands thing, when they do
Yeah,
it, is really important. And like, yeah,
right,
so I understand what you're saying, and that is, yeah, I think that's also something people need to be more aware of, as well as that just uh publishers, a good publisher is going to want to make sure that every part of what's happening is healthy, right?
right, right, exactly. And it's some people that don't know what that is, right? So it's like sometimes a publisher also has to be like that kind of teacher in that space. Sometimes publishers are not for that, right? Some of them are a little more like, oh, just business, and then probably won't get into business with somebody that maybe doesn't know. Um, but I feel that it's an interesting opportunity, especially for some like content creators like Donkey, where he doesn't know either. And I think, like I said, hiring somebody that does know and then learning along with, like whatever team, whatever game he wants to like, they want to pick up. And, it's an interesting thing to learn together, right? Especially if you have the resources to do so. Obviously, not everybody, has the same resources. Um, and, but sometimes I guess it could behoove also like the developer to sharpen up those skills that aren't necessarily, like the hard skills like coding or art or whatever to make them, but also like the production and the business side, which is very important, right? And you have to be ready because there's times that, unfortunately, there are some publishers and stuff that take advantage of developers, like in this predicament, that they don't know too much about the business or or keep up with like that side, right? And it can also be a little predatory at times. Um, Unfortunately, that's just, I guess, that's the way business is, quote unquote. But uh, it's good to know, and it's good to have people that know, right? It's at the end of the day, it is a business, and so it can go really well or not. Which for indie games, the average is usually not good. Unfortunately, I think like to be like a quote unquote successful indie game, you're selling out on like 10, 20,000 copies. That's huge. That's like, oh man, like that's a successful selling indie game. That is nothing compared to how much it costs to make a game. Just 3 or 4 years, five, six people. That's a lot of money. A lot of money. So yeah, you want to make sure that whatever you're investing in is worthwhile. So yeah, a lot.
Yes, 100%. Um, now, Pedro, I don't want to keep you too much longer. I don't want to take up too much more of your time. It's Monday evening.
Yeah,
You agreed to give me your time at 7, so I do want to let you get on with your evening. I want to give you a chance to relax. I don't want to monopolize too much of it. However,
that's all
if
right.
there was anything else you want to discuss, another cool game or something else you guys are doing, or just something you feel more people should be more aware of, by all means, the floor is yours. As well, please let everyone know where they can find more information about you, which I'll also include in the episode description.
Awesome. I mean, I feel we've covered uh quite a few things tonight. Like obviously I'm very passionate about creating, right, and creators and making sure that creators are given uh, the tools and the resources to kind of create the things that they want, right? That's how the medium grows. But the creators also have to be well studied in a lot of things that maybe they didn't consider before, right? I think that was like that's like a pretty big thing. For us, we're still creating Elsie. We're still in the process of developing the game. Hopefully, the game is gonna it's going well this year. There's a lot of cool stuff coming. And we're just excited to get into people's hands and just kind of have that release and see where we go from there. If it does well, we have some DLC already planned in the works. We already know kind of what we want to do, and we're looking at the prospect of like an LC2 or just a different game altogether. But we'll see. We'll see what happens with the first one. Right. You can always keep up with us on Twitter, mainly through at Night Shift Team. Night Shift Team. Yeah, we couldn't get Night Shift Games because it was a letter extra. We couldn't fit the S for games, so it was like a Night Shift Team, Night Shift with a K. And that's kind of where we do a lot of our updates. So you can also join our Discord at discord.gg/KSG. You can find us there too. We're sometimes active. We kind of post a lot of things that we post on Twitter. We post there too. And it's a big thing, especially if anybody's listening that maybe is thinking about getting into game creation or maybe thinking of switching careers. A big thing that I always tell people is involve yourself in the communities. Find if there's a community or not. Go to events, meet people. I think game jams are the best because that's where everybody kind of goes to do the same thing, and you can really start off there. Honestly.
Well, awesome. Thank you for that information, Pedro, for that, for the another call out to game jams, which, from the game jams I've looked into, playing, trying, what have you, and people I've spoken to, I think the mountain of evidence that agrees with that. So yeah, 100%. I think if anyone is, not is on the fence for game jams, listen to Pedro, listen to everyone else that has also said similar things, check them out. It's going to be great. It's going to be helpful. You'll get to meet people, like you said, that are all there for kind of the same thing, and you'll get to learn a lot and experience a lot. As well, Night Shift Team, Twitter.
Night Shift Team. I'm sorry. That's a travesty.
Night Shift Team, Twitter, and Discord and what have you. I'll make sure those links are available for people that want to follow, want to be, want to join the Discord, want to keep up to date and all that. I'll make sure that's available as well.
Yeah, also you can check out our publisher at Tunic Friends and at the Completionist. They're also amazing people. And we wouldn't be able to do this, without them. So always check them out too.
Definitely, yeah. I will also include those for everyone. For those that don't know anything about them, Platonic Friends has put out a handful of publishing games. The Completionist is a content creator. I think that does it in a bit of an injustice putting it that way. However, just a quick rundown. People, you can, if you don't know much about them, I encourage you to also look into them. They can follow the links and learn at their own pace and such as well. However, Pedro, as I said, if there wasn't anything else, I will let you get on with your Monday evening.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that's it. We covered quite a few good things. So hopefully it didn't come off too weird or I don't know. I'm always so self-conscious of every time I give a talk or something. I'm like, oh no, did it sound okay?
Well, Pedro, I don't think I've had any issue with anyone I've spoken to, and I think at the very least, people will understand as they listen, that you're passionate about what you guys are doing and what you're into. And I think that's the important part of what I'm trying to do is let people know that a game does not just create itself, that there are people behind it with like you said, living in Miami, Cuban descent, like you have that in you to kind of influence what you're going to want to do, as well as the video games you've played, as well as the video games everyone else on the team has played, right? So I wouldn't worry about anyone listening and thinking, oh, this guy's weird. I would I would say it's more what people should take away from this from listening to you talk and what have you is that you are a real person that is a part of a process to make a product, to make a game, and that just doesn't manifest itself into the world, right?
Yeah. Yeah, games don't manifest in the world. They are made by people. Um, People that are just so different too, right? Everybody is it comes from different walks of life, and to make something that a lot of people can enjoy, right? A lot of people do enjoy. Video games are like the biggest entertainment market in the world, right? So it's a crazy thing, but it's also super volatile and sometimes super difficult to work in. And that's just coming from like an independent developer like me, right? Can't even imagine, like any AAA studios, people that make big games. To me, that's still magic, right? I can know how games are made, and even then, it's like I don't know how they do this. So yeah, there are definitely people behind the pixels.
And Peter, I think that's the best place to leave that off on, is there are definitely people behind the pixels.
Yes.
So thanks again to Pedro for making time to have this conversation with me, and thank you for joining us on the Red Tunic podcast, as well as a special thanks to Ronald Jenkins for the use of music from the title track from Roads Deep. And if you like this podcast and want to support it and help it grow, please subscribe or follow me on Twitter at Red Tunic Podcast to receive the latest episodes and news, and be sure to share it with those you think might also enjoy it. Thanks, until next time.